With that, we'll get started. If you haven't seen me speak here before, my name is Matt Scheurer. My talk today is Cloud Security and Other Assorted Cautionary Tales. If you would like a copy of the slide deck, if you go to http://slides.dfirmat.com, it'll redirect you to my GitHub repo. You can download a PDF copy of this slide deck, and it has all the links and stuff like that in it. And with that, let's kick it off. So I work for a big, well-known organization. I guarantee everybody here has heard of it. Promise it's not a vendor, but everybody there loves me with one notable exception. The corporate communications folks are not particularly fans of my community engagement. But anyhow, I can't mention it because of that. However, Vice President Computer Security Incident Response, a lot of hands-on digital forensics incident response work there. Also have a podcast been in the dustbin for years, but one of these days maybe we'll spin it back up. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, do hit me up on there. And also I still have an account on X. Probably most of my social media stuff is on LinkedIn these days. So do some volunteer work. I'm a hacking is not a crime advocate. It's not to say that cybercrime isn't crime, because it most certainly is. It's to say that hacking is not a crime. That's coming here to SecureWV. That's participating in the CTF. That's going in the lockpick village and playing around. And that's applying the skills that you learn to environments you have access to. Things like try, hack me, hack the box. Again, the CTF that they're running here. Any of those kinds of things where you have authorized permission if you get into penetration testing, any sort of offensive security discipline with the appropriate permissions. I have some issues with how we teach cybersecurity these days. I feel like we tried to teach people how to run. They never learned how to walk or crawl before that. So back home at the Warren County Career Center, I'm on the advisory board for their IT and cybersecurity program, trying to fix and make sure we're teaching sound fundamentals, as well as the new stuff. WAMSA is the Women's Security Alliance, and I'm a technical mentor for WAMSA. They're always looking for mentors and mentees. If that is something that speaks out to you, check out their website, wamsa.org. Quick, boring disclaimer, I've got a day job, but the opinions expressed are my own views and opinions. They do not express or reflect the views or opinions of my employer. All right, my agenda for today is we're going to review some major cloud security problems. We're going to cover some cloud-specific security strategies to help really reduce the attack surface. And I've got some things for the big three cloud platforms in here that you can take and apply to your environment. And then we're going to laugh at my pain. And we're going to have a really good time doing so, because frankly, if I don't laugh, I'll cry, and we don't want that. So, all right. Cloud security issues. These things are mostly preventable, but they're scary. The theme of the conference is things that will keep you up at night, and these are the things that probably should be on top of mind. And if something's going to keep you up at night, these are the kinds of things. So accidental exposure. Sometimes we put data in the cloud and we accidentally expose it, and we end up with data breaches, leaks, those sort of things. So again, highly preventable. We're going to cover some specific strategies to hopefully avoid doing that. But it's definitely a big problem. Shared secret leaks. So usernames, passwords, any sort of credentials, authorization, tokens, keys, private keys, anything like that that gets leaked online is a big problem. And even though we talk about these things, it still happens. And it's very problematic because if somebody has what it takes to authenticate into your systems, they don't need some zero-day vulnerability. They don't need some sophisticated exploit. They can just walk right in. Lack of visibility and assets management. That's a problem everywhere. However, when you get into a cloud environment and the cloud platforms, it's a little bit more magnified, because all of a sudden you can't just protect that behind your on-premises firewall and be somewhat protected from things being directly exposed to the internet where they can be pounded on mercilessly. So it's really hard to protect the things in your environment if you're not aware that they're out there, which is why this is very much a big security concern. Shadow and vulnerable APIs. I've got a story about this later where we're going to talk about this, but this is definitely a big problem. And finally, inadequate logging. Most of the time in the cloud, you aren't going to have packets. You're not going to have decrypted packets with full information. So you're really dependent on your log files to answer who, what, where, why, when, and how. And if you don't have those log files, if they're not logging good information, you really have to go extra lengths to try to tell the story of what happened. And not having logs really makes that very problematic to figure out what happened. Were we breached? Was it just a scan? What were the results of that? Were these attack attempts successful or were they not? If you don't have good logs, it's really hard to answer those kinds of questions. So we're going to talk specific security tips for AWS, Azure. Now, look, I pronounce it Azure. If you have a different pronunciation, that's fine. I've heard all variations, and we can agree to disagree on these, and that's fine. I've heard Azure and Azure and you name it. Look, I'm just here to give you a cloud security talk, not tell you how to live your life. So pick your favorite pronunciation and roll with it. And then finally, GCP, the Google Cloud Platform. We'll talk a bit about that. So AWS, this is not every security component in it. I don't have time for that. It would be a talk in and of itself. But I want to highlight some specific items that you have within AWS when you log into your account. So CloudTrail, again, we talked about the importance of logging and why that's important. Well, that's where all of your activity and event logging happens, are in CloudTrail logs. Now, maybe you're keeping them there, maybe you're sending them off to a SIM, but you got to have good logging somewhere, and that's really the mechanism within AWS that does that. GuardDuty is sort of like your EDR within the cloud platform. That's what's native to AWS. Now, if you have something third party for any of these cloud platforms, great. Like, you know, as long as you have something. And if you don't have some third party system that's doing this for you, make sure that GuardDuty is monitoring, detecting, and alerting the right things. Make sure you're actually getting the alerts so you know to look at things. And usually it's going within those CloudTrail logs to try to answer those questions when you need to investigate something. I call out CloudWatch. Now, CloudWatch in and of itself is really intended to be a performance monitoring utility within AWS. Why is that important? Well, if somebody is attacking something, is there an explanation for it? So in other words, if your elastic computing all of a sudden goes berserk, maybe you just had an update or a release or something was all of a sudden a new product that just came, this is day one. You can understand why you would see an increase in activity. If there is no plausible explanation for a sudden spike and all of a sudden your elastic computing resources, well, we went from 2 to 5, that might be your sign. This is something we need to look at. Also, there are things like crypto miners and ransomware activities and those other kinds of things. It could be there's smoke, is there fire? Now you need to go investigate it, but those are the kinds of things. If you have unexplained performance spikes, what's causing it? And those are the things that you want to look into because it could be a sign of a very sophisticated problem. Now, attack surface reduction. This is not a knock on AWS. I like AWS. It's a very robust platform capable of a lot of different things. One thing, though, that's also true of AWS is there are a lot of different ways to do just about anything in AWS, and virtually none of them are particularly straightforward. So, what I recommend is they don't have just a go-to and look at, hey, here's all your exposed stuff. But Amazon themselves wrote this blog article. It's got about 8 or 9 different ways that you can find things that are publicly exposed. And what I would recommend is, since AWS wrote it themselves, Amazon wrote this, you should go look at it because not every one of those maybe is ideal, but chances are one of those strategies will be something that you can implement. Have a look at those, figure out which one makes the most sense given how you are configured. Some AWS security training. I try to highlight training that is fun. I'm a big believer that you learn best and most when you're having a good time or you find it enjoyable. And so Flaws is pretty cool. If you haven't played around with that, flaws.cloud, there's also flaws2.cloud. Now, flaws.cloud gives you the offensive security perspective on how AWS is attacked. And it's fun, it's gamified, it's very CTF style, if you will. What's cool about flaws2.cloud is you can play that as the attacker or the defender. You can actually play it one way and then go back later and play it the other way. If you understand how something is attacked, you also start to understand how you might go about defending it. And so these are some fun training resources you can use for that purpose. Azure has, again, a bunch of different security components. I'm not going to go through everything, but I want to highlight some specific ones. So Defender for Cloud has your security alerts. It's got Cloud Explorer, and I'll show you what that is here in a moment. And it's also got workbooks that you can playbook out things, look for certain things. Very powerful tool. Microsoft Sentinel is the full service SIEM. If you have like an E3 or an E5, you probably have Sentinel. One thing to note for your security incident event management is that, yes, you get the service, but you're going to pay extra for the storage on that. Just because you have the license to use it doesn't mean Microsoft lets you throw as many logs in there as you want and use it as much as you want. That's not really the case. But it is a good, powerful SIEM platform. It uses KQL, the Kusto query language. I am actually a fan of the Kusto query language. So also identity and access management controls. Again, controlling access to your resources is really important for security. That should be pretty obvious that you have role and rule-based access controls, those sort of things. So controlling who can get into a system and what permission levels they have when they get into these resources is also pretty important for securing a Microsoft Azure environment. Cloud Security Explorer, what I like about this is you can build some really cool KQL queries. It lets you hunt for and find the bad stuff before the cyber criminals do. And I've got a screenshot here of what this looks like, and what I'm doing in here is you have a lot of different drop-down options. And so in my example here, I'm looking for Azure virtual machines, and then the criteria under that is exposed to the internet. Like literally you just pick those two options from the drop-down and hit search, and it will tell you what you have publicly exposed to the internet. Now, if you like Azure Graph and you're a KQL wizard and whatever, I'm not saying don't use that. What I like about this is virtually anybody can run a simple query using Cloud Security Explorer. You don't need advanced KQL knowledge. You can just do it. You can also look for databases that are exposed. I actually used it to help find and harden in a developer environment some Azure blob storage that had some exposure. It didn't have critical information in there, but again, it really didn't need to have that level of exposure. Using this particular tool, we were able to find it, able to harden it, and it's, again, baked right in. Super powerful and very simple to use. That's why I like it. Some fun training, the Kusto Detective Agency. I like this. It's very CTF gamified. You are a detective. You have a mission in your inbox that you get to use the security tools and go through, and it's, again, very gamified. It's a lot of fun. You can really hunt for things and look for it. Really cool. They also offer the security training, the SC200. If you have heavy Microsoft Azure in your environment, might want to consider looking at that security certification. And then finally, Microsoft Security Academy. They have a lot of different what they call ninja trainings. And what's nice is those are free, and they have ninja trainings for all sorts of stuff. Sentinel, again, dives into KQL, a lot of other trainings as well. And again, they're free, and they're not too bad, so check them out if that's something you want to get better at securing. GCP, attack surface reduction. The Google Cloud Platform, what's interesting is it has the Security Command Center. It's the closest thing to any of the three cloud platforms as a one-stop shop to where all the security stuff is. Now, in the past, it was actually just one big long page. It would scroll page after page after page, just one big list of stuff that had everything in it. They finally tabbed it out, so it's a little more palatable looking at screen and one tab at a time. But in particular, you have the findings, and here's a query, and the query is simply state equals active and not muted. And not mute equals muted. So essentially something that's not intentionally muted, so it doesn't show up in these results. It'll show you everything else. So anything that's active that's in the GCP platform. And then in category equals public _ IP _ address. This will help you identify things in GCP that are accidentally exposed to the internet. Now, maybe there's good reason for some data to be exposed to the internet. In a lot of cases, there isn't. So you have to figure out what the data is, or who knows what the data is. Does this really need to be, or should this really be exposed to the internet? Yes, this has public information that we use to disclose such and such, and we have it that way on purpose. And in any cloud platform, there might be a good justifiable reason for things to be public, but this will help you identify, at least figure out what is, so you can begin asking those questions with your stakeholders internally. Now, I would like to highlight something called CAFR. This is Cloud Automated Forensics and Incident Response. It was written by a gentleman I know, Matt Coons. He goes by Arbor Bytes on social media. And so what's really cool is this is basically a Python script. He attempted within GCP to automate forensics and incident response. You can have a look at his GitHub repo. It's a free resource, free tool. If you need to modify that code, it's right there on GitHub, so you can see how he's done what he's done and maybe modify it or just use it as is, whatever the situation may be. But I wanted to call it out because I thought he did a really good job with that. I would love to tell all of you I know this really cool, super fun Google security training. If it exists, I have yet to find it. So if you know, tell me afterwards so I can include it. But they do have, at least it's free, this Security Engineer Learning Path. And again, it's on Cloud Skill Boost for Google. And it's a free training. It's pretty dry. It's not fun. It's not gamified. It's not entertaining. But hey, it's free and it's got good information in there. So now I'm going to pivot into something I call SAD. And some of you may be wondering, what is this SAD and why did you spell it the way you did with capital S, lowercase a, capital D? If you've spent any time at all looking at cloud stuff, you've seen all sorts of acronyms. You've seen SaaS, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, on and on. What I call SAD is stupidity as a disservice. Tragically, I have a lot of sad stories to share with all of you today. However, again, this is the laugh at my pain stuff. Learn from these mistakes so you don't repeat them yourself. So the first one I'm going to start off with, because I got plenty of time, is a bonus sad story. I call it Hit with a Frying Pan. PAN is capital P-A-N here, and if you're not in financial services, you might not understand. That stands for Primary Account Number. Most commonly, we think of credit card numbers as being a primary account number. And when it comes to PCI compliance, first 6, last 4, everything else has to be redacted. Everything else has to be obfuscated or omitted. And so in the beginning, we have a cloud engineer, and she's talking to the application folks and says, hey, this red triangle with this big exclamation point saying it's that the cloud storage shouldn't be publicly readable. Is that a problem? Is that concerning? Cloud app developer, oh no, the application won't permit anything bad to happen because users have to upload or access the data. Months later, hey, we just got hit with this data extortion email. They're saying they got our data, they're demanding payment, and if we don't pay, they're going to do all this nasty stuff that's going to tarnish our reputation. What in the world is going on here? And the cloud application is like, oh, well, hey, don't worry. In order for anybody to get to the data, the user has to log in to the application in order to view or work with the data in there. And I'm thinking, it's configured. The storage itself is configured as publicly accessible. This makes no sense to me whatsoever, because if you understand how web crawling, web spidering, and fuzzing work, you understand how this stuff is easily discovered online, and the application does you no good if the storage itself is publicly accessible. So what's in the data? Developers are like, oh, nothing much. It's really just some receipt image files and documents. Now, if we go to lunch and you get a receipt from the food court, or you know, depending if they furnish receipts for downstairs for the lunch they're having catered in, it's usually one slip of paper. There's really nothing identifiable in there. It's got the time and the day and maybe what the purchase was and some just really redacted information. If I book a hotel, I got a 1 or 2 page receipt. There's really not much sensitive in there. Same thing if I book a flight. No big deal, right? You wouldn't think so, except when you start clawing through what the data is and saying, hey, guess what? Customers will do the darndest things. They'll just upload 11, 14 pages of stuff, including things that have full credit card information, the card number, the expiration date, the CVV code, everything that you would need to solve your Amazon wish list and have nothing left on it. It's just a bad situation, right? And so now the problem is we don't just have data extortion, data exfiltration and attempted extortion. We have a full-blown data privacy incident. So we've gone from bad to worse because nobody thought this kind of data was in there, except when I'm manually reviewing it, I discovered a couple instances of it. It wasn't even just one, it was multiple. So my sad story advice here is avoid allowing public access to your cloud storage. Know what details are in your data, and then finally, protect users from themselves. Maybe there should be a little tick that says, I will not upload personally identifiable information, sensitive financial information, something like that. Or at the very least, they should have been trained, here's what you don't do. You know, stick to just basic receipts that aren't going to leak sensitive information out there, something like that, because if we don't tell the users, there's how we think they're going to use a service or a system and how they actually will. So my official sad story number 1 is called, Of Course We Did. Not. Starts off innocently enough saying, hey, application owner, I just got a pen test alert. They found we're able to sign into this cloud application. They're using the default credentials. Like, what's going on here? Didn't we change that? And the application owner's like, oh yeah, absolutely. We always change. You know, if we can change the username, we do that. We always set a different complex password, and we don't leave the defaults in there, except a couple minutes later after I test it myself and get right in with full admin rights, I have to reach out and be like, yeah, no, that's not true. I was able to get right into it myself. And since it's an admin account, I think last year I may have touched on initial access brokers or mentioned it in passing. So if somebody gets access to the system, they have full admin rights, they can create other accounts, they can sell them off on the dark web. All of a sudden you have no idea, maybe it's the person who figures it out first, but maybe they sell it off to somebody else or they spin up some extra accounts. These are very concerning things. You have to be able to answer, did this happen here? And so after informing the application owners, like, oh yeah, we'll get the password changed right away. And yeah, that's definitely an immediate need. And now, again, we have to look to make sure we didn't have unauthorized accounts getting created. We didn't have unauthorized access. We have to figure out what the level of exposure was. Like within the configurations, what else could they figure out potentially about the environment if somebody did get in, all of that stuff. So my sad story number one advice is always change your application default credentials. Also, don't forget to test to make sure that the first thing was done, that they were actually changed, because if you can get in with admin as the password, that's not good. Or whatever the default is, if it's probably out there online somewhere, make sure that the default creds have been changed. My second scenario I call, is that a data lake or a data leak? And it starts off with the cloud engineer saying, hey, application owner, before we migrate this application to the cloud, we've got this database, and just want to make sure there's no sensitive information in here. And application owner is like, no PII data, no personally identifiable information, no sensitive information, anything like that's in that database. We don't need to worry about it. Well, until a couple months later when they're reaching out to the incident response team and saying, hey, the data classification scan we just ran found there is sensitive information in this database, and this application a couple months ago was migrated to the cloud. And so my day just got a lot busier. So first thing we need to do is we need to shut it down right away, because we have potentially sensitive information exposed online. This is not a good situation. And then also, we need to pivot our investigation to looking for signs of unauthorized access and data leakage. I would love to tell everybody that happened once. No, it happened multiple times. It's so painful that organizationally, in a big organization, we didn't learn the lesson the first time. It happened again and again. So data governance is really important. Know what's in your data before you actually migrate it to the cloud. Story number 3 is, must be a bad connection. Starts off with me asking a developer lead, like, hey, we just got a security alert that one of our cloud hosts is talking to a known hostile nation's crypto miner IP addresses. What's going on? And the developer team lead's like, oh, don't worry about it. That's our dev test environment. Those resources don't have any access to the internet. And I'm thinking, this answer makes no sense whatsoever. If this has no access to the internet, how in the world is it talking to known hostile country crypto miner IP addresses? All right, now the bad news is, the logs are not in the SIM platform. So I reach out and say, hey, we need to get access to the native containers so we can get the logs off of there so we can start analyzing them. And so here's the challenge, right? Well, unfortunately, no, we can't get the logs because the application, this dev test application, apparently has a memory leak condition. And so until they get around to fixing that, their solution is to just purge and recreate the containers every 24 hours. So the logs we need to look at from when this thing was compromised, everything about it was completely obliterated, and we're looking at a fresh deployed instance that is brand spanking new. So all of our evidence completely gone. I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. This is so horrible on so many different levels. For better or worse, pretty soon, guess what? Alert fires back up. These resources, the system's talking to known hostile country crypto miner IP addresses again. All right, so I know I don't have the logs in the SIM, so reach out to the developer or team lead, tell them what's going on, And, oh, you know what? Guess what? We didn't think they had internet access, but apparently this dev test environment is sitting behind the load balancers. Well, that answers that. Now we know it did have internet access the whole time. They didn't believe it did, but it absolutely did. So, yeah, we're shocked, but hey, good news is we can get you access to get the log files now. And I'm thinking, okay, this dev test environment behind the load balancers, you've got to be kidding me. This is so horrible on so many different levels. It's like I had the same thought just 2 slides ago. So my sad story number 3 advice is retain your log files and understand your environment, even if it's just a dev test environment. Sad story number 4 is sorry, not sorry to interrupt your vacation. So it starts off with me saying, hey, developer manager, we just got a pen test report that RDP is listening on a cloud host, and the resource owner is currently offline. We can't get in touch with them to say, what are you doing? What's happening here? We got to get this disabled now. And the developer manager is like, oh yeah, that developer, they're actually out on vacation right now, but I'm going to reach out to them right away. We have a big phone investigation call bridge that's going on. I'll have them join the call as soon as they can. Good deal. So a little bit later, they do join. And so when the developer joins, like, hey, thanks for joining our phone bridge. We have a host that's actively allowing RDP access. This is a huge security risk because threat actors, cyber criminals, can just keep pounding away at this thing all day long until they can brute force some credentials that might work. We got to get it disabled like right away. And the developer's like, oh yeah, sorry about that. See, I was having VPN problems when I was at work, and so what I did is I just created a temporary jump host in this cloud environment. Now here's the risk. You have a jump host. The purpose of a jump host is so you have a system that lets you pivot into the environment to do your work. But there's no barriers once somebody gets on the jump host to the environment itself. That's why this is a very huge security risk. So anyway, they created this jump host so they could get into the environment since they were having VPN issues while they were on vacation. But they were going to turn it off when they got back. Anybody here ever take a vacation from work? Now, I'm guessing more than a few of you. Probably like most of the people in this room, right? What happens when you come back from a vacation? That thing that you're going to get to first, do you ever get to that thing first? No, you never do. Why? Because people are calling you. They're hitting you up in your groupware application. You're getting direct messages. You're going through emails. You're having to look at what meetings you got summoned to while you were gone. So you get back, you get busy, you get sidetracked. That thing you were going to get to is easily an afterthought. And what happens if you don't remember it later on because you got so busy, right? So my sad story number 4 advice is do not circumvent security for convenience. There is no good excuse for bad OPSEC, which is bad operational security, in a case like this, a jump host. So my last story that I'm going to wrap up with here, I call it heavy metal with a large composition of irony. Now, I can't tell this story for certain reasons exactly as it unfolded, but I've got an idea here. I can kind of convey what may have happened in a little bit different way. So this one stings a lot. In May of last year, I was giving a talk. Actually, it was a minor update to a talk I gave during the pandemic years at SecureWV on hacking web APIs. And I'm giving an updated version of this at the Cincinnati OWASP chapter. This is a very hands-on keyboard hacking APIs in my demo environment. But really showing people what the vulnerabilities are, how the attacks work, how powerful they are, what the objectives are. But as part of that, I created a couple new slides, and one of them was trending API risks, because I started reading up on what are the big trends happening here. And so shadow APIs are a problem because these are APIs that somebody puts in with the intention of, again, removing probably later on, but they're done outside of proper processes. They're done outside of proper procedures and controls. They're just slopped in, and then if they get forgotten about, but even while they're there, knowingly while they're there, they pose risks because they haven't been properly vetted. They haven't been ensured that they are tight. They haven't gone through a penetration test review, for example. And the other thing I talked about was publicly or accidentally exposed APIs. And I said I was going to talk about this a little bit later, and I literally gave this on May 8th of 2024. What I had no idea is exactly what was happening behind the scenes, literally while I'm giving this talk, that I find out 1 week later to the very day. So, let's say we have a hypothetical scenario here. Let's say you have a pot of gold that you want to protect, or a pot of data. You know, vendors out there, they're sponsoring a conference. They love telling us stuff like, data is the new gold, or data is the new oil, data is the new thing of historic intrinsic value. I'm not much for sales marketing fluff myself. I wish I could remember the lady's name. I did hear one, though. She said data is the new bacon. I kind of like that one. But anyway, stick with me here. Let's go with our pot of gold or data that we want to protect. So we invest heavily in our security. We've got great perimeter security. We have armed guards, and their post orders are, whatever you do, your one mission is do not let any unauthorized people make their way through that door. This is a secured door. It's got 3 locks on it. There's no welcome mat in front of this door. In fact, it's got a sign that says authorized personnel only. And in the hall, we've got a motion camera. We've got a camera and a motion sensor. We've got alarm set up to fire on any number of triggers. So we feel really good about our security and protecting our pot of gold and data. And behind it, we didn't forget about the back-end security. No. Any unwitting thing that comes behind or through that door, behind that door in a kiddie pool is a mean, hungry alligator ready to chomp down on anything that goes through that door that doesn't know any better, that's unexpected, that's unplanned for, that shouldn't happen. And behind our alligator, we have our pot of gold, our pot of data. There's an issue with the floor plan, though, as we look at it. So we've got our guards, we've got our front-end security tools, we've got some walls and a door, and our alligator pool, and our pot of gold or data. But the problem is the walls don't actually connect to anything. They're not actually a properly isolated room here. So if you have a cyber criminal, a threat actor that wants to get at our pot of gold or data, they're not going to try to go through all that tough front-end security and take a chance on what's waiting behind the scenes at the back end with that alligator pool. Oh, no. If you've seen the cyber kill chain, threat actor, they go around all of it, and they just grab our pot of gold data, completely bypassing every security control we have in place. And then we have in the kill chain our action on objectives. They grab our gold or data. They're running off with the stolen loot. And that's really what that looks like. Now, I talk at conferences. I talked about how many before we officially started here. It's a lot. Most of the security problems I've seen are things I have personally talked about, either in passing or spent a lot of time focused on, and yet these are the things most often, that cause us the biggest security issues. And I always think, darn, I gave a talk about that. If the people that needed to hear the information heard the information and they got it and they understood it, this all could have been avoided. So as I go around literally from coast to coast in this country at conferences everywhere and give these talks, and encourage people to get the message, grab the slide deck, share them with your coworkers. In other words, listen to that dude, Matt. He knows what he's talking about. Not sure how I'm doing on time, but happy to see if we got time. Yeah, we got plenty of time for questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
So what happened to that developer?
What happened to the developer is they got a nice scolding. We certainly impressed upon them why what they did wasn't particularly good. Unfortunately, a lot of the cloud problems I've seen weren't really from the enterprise itself. I mean, they were and they weren't. What I mean by that is usually they were part of merger and acquisitions. These are smaller organizations. They don't have the security controls yet. They don't have all the security measures in place. Worse still, when you have mergers and acquisitions, they are thinking very much in an agile developer mode, and it's all about sprints and meeting deadlines. The security person isn't a dedicated security person. It's very often somebody who is wearing a ton of hats, and so they are the security person by default because nobody else really understands it or wants to do it or tackle it. It's sort of tough when you go through these transitionary periods because, you know, maybe they're kind of half onboarded in HR systems and that sort of thing. So I don't know, beyond being told, yeah, that was really not a smart thing to do, please don't do it again. I don't know if anything happened beyond that, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things, and like, honestly, transitioning takes a long time, mergers and acquisitions into a proper enterprise, and just drilling in that security mindset and mentality and thinking security first. And there's also this thing where we take it to heart. We don't want to be the department of no. We want a department be the department of, we want to help you get the things done you need to do, but we want to do it in a secure manner. Don't try to work around us or work against us. Work with us. We're willing partners. But you need to have, as a security professional, that mindset that you're willing to work with people in other areas. Last year at the SecureWV keynote, I left everybody with this, which was people in depth. People in depth is how we win. That's how we move the needle towards better security. Any other questions? Yes. Recommendations for Azure security training. So I can go back to that slide. I mentioned Custo Detective Agency.
I got that one, but I'll hit you up later. But if you've got other ones, I'll take other ones.
Okay. One other one I can tell you about, if you aren't familiar with KQL, I actually did make a KQL workshop. It's about a 2-hour workshop. It actually uses the Custo Detective Agency. It just goes off script, but it literally walks people through every step of the process. It explains what we're looking for and how to construct the KQL queries and how to build on existing ones. And I think that might help you. It's on my GitHub repo. And if you don't have that link, let me know and I can definitely help you with that. But yeah, if you aren't familiar with KQL, and that's with anybody, feel free to hit me up afterwards. Happy to share that. Go to the back.
How have you adapted to handling data going out to AI platforms for developers and things? Like, how have you approached securing that where the data is now out to what could be perceived as the public domain now that it's in an AI form?
Yeah, so just to sum up that question, it's really how do you keep data from going out the door when people are using AI. And to be honest with you, that's sort of a tricky proposition. I can tell you where I work, we've actually gone to great pains to ensure that the data never touches the internet. It's not particularly easy to do. There's a couple of methods that we've done that. So for one platform, we have really worked with the vendor to ensure that the information doesn't go outside of the environment. In other words, it can go out and pull in, but it can't send anything egress. In the other situation, we took actually an older LLM that had no internet access whatsoever. So we built on its pretty old model, and so sometimes that antiquity of it creates some interesting challenges, and we lack some features and so forth that we would like to leverage, but we haven't made that leap yet. So we have really worked hard on prevention and ensuring that everything that's in the environment stays that way. Now, the other thing is, fortunately where I'm at, we have a dedicated threat hunting team, and they are constantly looking for those kinds of things. We do have people within one AI platform. They are actually reviewing a lot of the prompts and so forth, looking for, well, we also have an insider threat group as well, and they're also looking for prompts and things that could be problematic from a security standpoint. So we are very proactive about that. To be honest with you, somebody else here hopefully has a talk coming up in the conference that maybe speaks a little more to that particular aspect. So that's just what our organization specifically has done on that front. But yeah, that's definitely a big concern.
Okay, this one's about APIs.
APIs, okay.
How can you establish some strict controls so that APIs always follow a certain pattern that is allowed and bust your developers before it ever gets to that number?
Yeah, so it really boils down to governance of your APIs, and that's something you have to stay on top of. So, you know, again, we proactively look for a lot of that stuff in the environment and try to identify it. We also have some DLP measures in place, things like that. I will be honest with you, in one of the situations I highlighted, the challenge for us is, again, it didn't go through the front-end web app security. It didn't go through the web application firewall because the person was able to hit the API directly on the cloud. If you remember going around all that front-end security, that's kind of what that illustrates. It's a real challenge. I think one thing is you really have to have buy-in, review. You can't just take the developer's word for it, but you do have to kind of train them up. You do have to have people that are watching for those sort of things. It's definitely hard with shadow APIs, make sure it doesn't happen, and also make sure your APIs are properly secure. We do have the ability, people that can request a penetration test on APIs, and we always encourage them, please do that to make sure. We would much rather have our internal people find it before it gets exposed to the internet than a threat actor or after it gets exposed to the internet. So that's how we try to stay ahead of it as best as we can. So see, one more question maybe here. Anybody have one? All right, maybe it's the sunglasses, but I don't see any hands going up. So with that, thank you, SecureWV!